All right.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. James Broomall, an associate professor of history at Shepherd University, as well as the director of the George Heather Moore Center for the Study of the Civil War, Center for the Study of the Civil War. And I'm extremely excited by tonight's event. My colleague, Dr. Ben Bankhurst, an assistant professor of history, is going to introduce our speaker, but I will just briefly say Cicero came to our campus in the fall, delivered a very powerful presentation. The book that we'll be discussing tonight, Black Huntington, is just an incredibly intriguing work. And he is also pursuing a whole series of new projects, which are likewise fascinating. And we had hoped to get him here in the fall of 2020, but it looks like that's not gonna happen. So tonight we're here virtually, and we're extremely excited to have Cicero. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague and friend, Dr. Ben Bankhurst.
Well, thank you, Jim. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Cicero Fain III back to Shepherd University. Now, we had you, I think it was February, we had you on campus. It was one of our most popular events of the semester. That was co-sponsored by the Shepherd University Appalachian Studies program. Now, Dr. Fain is professor of history at the College of Southern Maryland, where he has taught in the Division of Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences, and Education for the last decade. Before joining the faculty at CSM, he completed his PhD research at the Iowa State University. Dr. Fain has published and presented on a wide range of subjects, including Black history in the 19th and 20th century, in 19th and 20th century Appalachia, urban history, and American social history. It has been, over the last few months, it's been my pleasure to be reacquainted with much of Dr. Fain's early work, as I've been attempting, like many faculty, to adjust to the new normal and to reconfigure my lectures on Appalachian history in light of the COVID crisis. So many of the subjects that he's touched upon in his body of research include Black workers on the C&O Railroad and a series of articles that he published about race relations in Cabell County. Those, I should just state, are absolutely groundbreaking. Now, Dr. Fain's work is required reading for scholars seeking to better understand the dynamics of power and race in West Virginia and Appalachia more generally in the era of Reconstruction. This evening, Dr. Fain will expand upon subjects and themes drawn from his recent book, published late last year by the University of Illinois Press, the book that Dr. Broomall has introduced, Black Huntington, an Appalachian Story. And I guess without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Cicero Fain to our discussion.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored and humbled, and hope that I can be worthy of the invite and appropriately answer the questions that folks will have in a fair and open-minded and authoritative way, if at all possible.
Of course.
Look forward to it.
Well, and thank you all for tuning in. Our live stream audience is growing here. Feel free as we go through the conversation to pose any questions. And obviously time's always an issue, but we'll get to those that are appropriate, and maybe after the program's concluded, we can kind of go back and backfill some of the materials. But for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to read Cicero's work, it's a deeply personal story. And so I think to start us off, there's a very compelling sort of beginning narrative about your personal experiences, but then the work itself is largely historical in nature, of course, starting in the antebellum era and going through the early 20th century. And so there's this interesting, I don't want to say tension, but there is a tension between some of the mythology that I think you grew up with, some of the historical realities that you began to discover as an academic historian. And so you have to sort of mediate between those two realities, I guess.
Yes.
And so I think it would be helpful for our audience to maybe understand a bit about your personal journey to writing this book. I mean, you seem compelled to have done so. And it's an area that you clearly deeply cherish, yet you have to look at in sort of an objective and removed way.
Sure.
And so that's an interesting tension for an author to explore. But it's also a story that I think had to come to the forefront. It's a story that, as we'll get into as the conversation progresses, that I think is often neglected. And so maybe then just briefly, give us a little bit of background about how you came to the study.
Well, thanks, Jim. You're just surrounded by so many, grew up in a small Black community, and you're surrounded by folks who are telling stories, who are living histories, and as a young lad, it's not anything I was particularly interested in, but it's something that I guess continually germinated throughout the years as I grew up, and listening to folks talk about Carter G. Woodson, or talk about the Black neighborhood, or talk about the stores that existed, the vibrancy of the community, that I was able to at least witness some extent of it. I mean, at its height, Huntington had around 85,000 people. And so, that's not exactly a small place. And so, it was fascinating for me to see and to know Black lawyers, Black artists, Black accountants, Black barbers, Black workers of different stuff, Black postal workers, Black industrial workers, and many of them having middle class incomes and status, and on all of us somewhat interacting, not necessarily socializing with each other, but certainly there was a recognition that this is a unique. In my mind, I think there was a recognition that this is something unique, and the community was constructed in such a way that the houses had front porches as well, and so it was not uncommon that you'd walk down the street and you just say hi to somebody sitting on the front porch, and they say hi back to you. Oh, you're the Fain boy, or you're the da, da, da. And so that kind of, to me, that validated my existence in a way that I really didn't know I needed that validation in a broader white town. At its height, I think Black Huntington only had maybe 6% Black population. And so when you talk about the city having 94% white, the state very similarly demographic composition, and so it just reiterated to me that there's something special about this place. Now, getting to, and then just growing up and then not really appreciating it, of course, until you leave, and you once you leave, you realize, okay, well, hey, this is something a little unusual, and also coming across the local historians, the elders who spoke glowingly, lovingly about Huntington, and then realizing that if I wanted to do a scholarly research, I had to cut through some of that mythology, some of that romanticism, and that's where that's where the hard work is. And of course, my dissertation advisors told me, to be wary of the trap of romanticism. And so, survey multiple sources, find a way to confirm, verify, bolster your argument, your contentions, your observations. Let the documentation do the writing for you. Don't come in with a preconceived notion of how you want to construct it. And so I took those words of wisdom, those instructions to heart as best I could.
In that process, at any point, and again, I want to get back to some of the earlier history here, but at any point did all of a sudden the place that you had known so well become unfamiliar? I mean, so, I imagine it's had to been a process of discovery.
Sure, it was, most definitely. Did it become unfamiliar? I think to some extent I didn't know the, what's the word I want to use? The accomplishment of the forefathers.
Mm.
You know, I didn't know the sheer scope of what some of these folks were doing. You know, in a small town, in a small Black community, you didn't realize how much it radiated out and how much it impacted and influenced the region and the nation. Um, and so um, you're looking at it in somewhat of a, I guess you couldn't see the forest for the trees.
Hmm.
You know, you're looking at these individual stories and individual families, their trials and tribulations, their growth, their successes, their hardships, their sacrifices, their contributions, and then you pull back and then you realize, oh wow, the totality of the story is these folks were integral, critical to the rise of the city, to the rise of New River Valley, to the rise of the Ohio River Valley, and to the region and to the nation. Um, um, and so I think that's where I was really blown away.
Mm.
Um, and um, these folks were innovators. Many of them were innovators. And they were, I think the story was hidden, underserved. And that was the goal, at least to strike this to, what's the word? You know, I struck this rich vein of coal, and now let's extract it and 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 um, and show just how rich these folks' contributions were.
And I think on with that, and I'll turn it over to Ben. And thank you, Cicero. And again, thank you to our audience tuning in. Thank you for your comments, saying hello. There's some friends of the center. There's some friends of yours, I think, Cicero, who are coming in here live.
Fantastic. Yeah. Hello, everyone out there in Zoom land or Facebook land.
So thank you all very much. Again, your participation is always deeply appreciated. But you've already touched on this idea of, I don't know if the phrase is like a buried past, but an unknown past. And so I think what's powerful about the book's initial chapters is that you look at the antebellum era and you look specifically at the lives of the enslaved.
Yes.
And I think that there's this myth in Appalachia that this was a region that was devoid of enslaved peoples, that it was a region composed primarily of, you know, self-sufficient yeoman farmers, that it was predominantly white. And you actually introduce a pretty interesting narrative that contrasts this mythology and vastly complicates our understanding of not only the institution of slavery in Virginia, but specifically in the region of Appalachia. So before we get into some of the meat of the book, and I mean, this does of course compose your early chapters, can you talk about unpacking that mythology and putting in stark relief for our audience, I mean, how this region was deeply entwined with slavery and how there were so many enslaved people here that shaping.
I don't know about you. I was not introduced to slavery in West Virginia in any real concrete, deep fashion. It was, you know, background, and um, the Black people that I talked to invariably only had, you know, snippets, fragments of memories or documents, and so it was really important to be able to access archival information, census data, newspapers, court records, um, uh, and go also, I guess, to look at white, you know, white sources, white family diaries and histories and things like that. Generally speaking, when I tried to speak to white people, they would say invariably, um, you know, we treated our servants exceedingly well. And so that's the mythology. That's the way that's the way it was always constructed. This kind of benevolent situation. And I even had at least 2 to 3 white people tell me that I'm not going to discuss that part of our family history. And so what do? You try to bolster you go to Black sources, you go to other sources, and you try to construct a narrative that is informed and verifiable. And so that was a difficult challenge. It took a lot of digging across a wide range of sources throughout libraries, Ironton, Ashland, Huntington, West Virginia West Virginia State Library, multiple sources. And also I must give a shout out to Cayova, what's it called? Cayova Heritage Foundation or Heritage, a group down in Huntington that has tirelessly gathered a wide array of archival sources that were very helpful to me. And there, I must admit, there are a cadre of people in Huntington, Black and white, that are very much interested in this story, and who helped me dramatically in finding sources and verifying things and digging and sending me down pathways that bore fruit.
And if I may, and again, I promise Ben, I'm going to turn it over here. But
Sure.
if I may, just because I think we do have a pretty engaged audience here that seems very intrigued. I mean, maybe you can give some advice for audience members who themselves are interested in researching Black communities in Appalachia. I mean, what types of sources specifically, and how do you read those sources? Because in many instances, I assume you're reading across the grain.
Yeah, the wonderful thing is that, I mean, Huntington had it. The sources were there.
Right.
Within the institutions, the Black institutions, within white institutions, within Black community members, the sources were there. They just hadn't been put together. They haven't been looked at in a comprehensive way. They hadn't been looked at as trying to construct a narrative. And so you go through church records, church anniversary bulletins. You go through Douglas High School yearbooks. You go through newspapers. You go through family histories. You go through Bibles. You're going through. One of the greatest challenges for anyone doing research on Black Americans in the antebellum or Reconstruction era, even into the Jim Crow era, the people who wrote down things were the Black middle class. These folks didn't have an education. They didn't have time to write and chronicle their family histories in large measure. They were too busy working and raising a family, and trying to move up the economic ladder, and deal with Jim Crow era mechanisms that were constraining and confining them. And so it's a daunting task. I was fortunate, and I'll say this, and I mean this with with a sense of profound gratitude. If I hadn't done the story of Black Huntington when I did it, I would not have been able to complete it, because the people who contributed to it have passed on. And so if there's one suggestion or instruction I would give to anyone who is interested in doing this work, do it now. Find a way to do it now, because folks pass on. And when they pass on, in large measure, you're asking family members to be mindful enough to say, something, this needs to be kept. We need to give this to some entity or institution or person. And I know Marshall, I know Charleston, I know perhaps Morgantown, maybe Shepherdstown. There may be folks who are trusted that that these community members would reach out to. But in large measure, there's a great divide, and it's always been one of the issues that with Marshall is that the Black community in Huntington has never really trusted Marshall. They have many of the long-term members of the community have animus towards Marshall because Marshall's never seemingly coveted the Black community's voice and perspective. And so in any event, the sources are out there, I do believe, but it's going to require some digging, and it's going to require some financial support, hopefully from an institution or from Western Humanities Council or some entity, because it can be, thankfully I had, the Ohio State University, and I had a fellowship that allowed this. Not everyone has those resources. And I'm certainly, if anyone out there is seeking my counsel and wisdom, I'm always available to assist you as best I can.
Yeah. Very generous. Yeah. Thank you, Cicero. So I'll turn it over to Ben. And again, thank you all for tuning in. We have some people who have experienced some of the same trials in the archives and some of those frustrations. I think there's a number of your students who are tuning in this evening. So it's a Tuesday night, so good for them. But with that, I'll turn it over to Ben, and then we'll keep the conversation going.
Great. Well, so I have a couple of questions regarding that early history. Now, I'm an early Americanist by training, and what we know about the history of enslavement in West Virginia, the area that would become Huntington's at a very interesting juncture, right? I mean, it's close to the Kanawha River Valley, which is an enslavement in the Kanawha. In that region is very industrial based, obviously with the salt industries and whatnot, and then also along the Ohio you have sort of agricultural slavery. So I was wondering if you might want to, if you possibly could shed light on sort of the inheritance of those very different worlds of enslavement and shaping the community, the Black community of Huntington in the later era of the 19th and early 20th century.
Yeah, that's one of those. I didn't delve too deeply. The Kanawha salt mines. That's John Staley's fine work, and it certainly, I think it has some relevance to my work, of course. But my sense is, I think my research has shown that essentially most of the folks who come to Huntington and come to Cabell County, in large measure, are bypassing the Kanawha salt mines. I think it's just a differing era, perhaps, a different chronology. I see them, in essence, more or less coming from Central Virginia, where you still have the strictures of the Confederacy still vibrant, even if folks have been emancipated, and have garnered their freedom through their own self-emancipation efforts. I still think Central Virginia is retrograde, and Huntington. The fact that the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, College B. Huntington comes through, and is able to coerce, entice various leaders, community leaders, white community leaders, and white financiers, white politicians at the local level, as well as the state level, and is able to construct that railroad, unquestionably is a seminal event within West Virginia's history. But part of that is, of course, that wouldn't have been done without Black labor, or would it have been exceedingly more difficult for it to have been done. the the I think one of the challenges for any Black worker during this era is that how much how much of the man's boot on my neck, if I may use that, how much of it am I going to tolerate? How much is the quest for money? Because we're now living in a capitalist system. We've moved away from what was before. We're now ensconced in a capitalist system. How much of that coercive mechanism am I going to tolerate? How much can I deal with? And there are examples. I think I give one example in the book in which folks walk off during the holiday, Christmas holiday, I believe. And there was a couple other examples in which workers say, this far and no farther. There is a recognition that, I have limits to your dehumanization process and mechanisms. And when they felt that line had been crossed, they left, or they slowed down the work. But the backdrop is you've always got someone else seeking a job, and so consequently, if you leave or you protest too much, you can be easily replaced. Does that help answer your question?
Oh, yes, great.
Okay. Okay.
And a point raised, I think, in the answer that I'd like to follow up on is that migration is a central theme
Sure.
in the book.
Sure.
Now, I was wondering if you could tell us how Black migration into Cabell County or to Huntington fit into a larger narrative of Appalachian Black mobility, both within the region and without, from the period of the Civil War through the era of extraction and
Sure.
on to the era of the
Sure.
Great Migration.
It is, this whole, we're getting back again to the mythology of Black people, essentially, if we want to go back to, well, Black people, they were beloved in West Virginia. And the truth of the matter is we see across multiple counties at the end of the Civil War, Black people leave and go elsewhere. So whatever the social or familial relationships, the intimate relationships that may have existed between the slave master and the enslaved person, whatever that may have been, that didn't stop them from moving on and seeking the full meaning of freedom elsewhere. No, from Booker T. Washington on, I mean, that's, the whole notion of up from slavery, Booker T. Washington, this notion of migration, we're going, I think there's some real touchstones that are, I think, mentioned in the book, from Booker T. Washington to the River Jordan. There are examples in which the spiritual, the political, the personal journeys coalesce to compel migration, and of course economic, of course, as well. All of those coalesce, and I think they all are intertwined in the quest to move elsewhere, to seek greater opportunity, a sense of perhaps community, a sense of carving out an identity that is their own. And so one way, I think the one way that you can exhibit perhaps the greatest sense of freedom is to move in an era in which Jim Crowism is slowly but surely creeping across the Deep South. One way to deal with it, and perhaps the most logical way to deal with it, is, okay, you don't want me here. You're going to constrict and constrain me. You're going to attack me. You're going to, exhibit display violence against me. Well, then I'll move, and I'll take my money and my labor with me. And so now you've got to deal with the aftermath of that.
I think it would be useful, since we touched upon migration, though, to talk about the construction now of community. And so one of the things I think is so striking, on the one hand, you're doing a really interesting case study, which has it kind of, was in vogue in the 70s and 80s, is making thankfully a resurgence now where microhistories are becoming, I think, a really important means for historians to explore the past. And so you have a very tangible place with a very tangible body of evidence, and you're able to chart at the granular level how it sort of evolves over time. So can you give some sense, starting in the 1870s, of how that Black community begins to build, what it looks like demographically on the ground, and then what that socioeconomic model becomes by the late 19th century?
Sure. I mean, Huntington is no different than any other. I would subscribe and I suggest to you that Huntington's Black community is no different from any other Black community that is building itself up by its own efforts.
Right.
The migratory process, I've talked about it from Virginia, Central Virginia to Huntington, but it's also extending out west. It's going up north. I mean, all these millions of people that move during this era are all seeking greater opportunity, and defined in whatever terms they want to define it as. Huntington, Huntington's microhistory is relevant because there are elements in there that I think are universal. And I think, whether it's Asheville, North Carolina, whether it's Pittsburgh, whether it is Richmond, you see folks who arrive who rally around a sense of purpose. And that purpose is, we're going to build a community as best we can that allows us a sense of self, dignity, pride, social interaction, perhaps I think the latter part of it would be perhaps political expression, but within the confines of that church, because unfortunately within at least Huntington, and I think within Greater West Virginia during this era, it's not enough. There's not enough Black people. There's not enough to really impact the politics, the municipal politics, in a way, in a real appreciable way. But that's okay, because it really isn't the overarching goal anyway. The overarching goal is to establish the institutions necessary that will allow a Black community to feel a sense of self, a sense of self-empowerment, a sense of importance, and of course to demonstrate to greater white America that we are fine citizens of the community, religious folks who we're not here to challenge the status quo. We want to just build our community as best we can.
Great. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Ben. I'm sorry. But I mean, do you think, though, that sense of establishing identity is in itself a political act? Are they...
Most definitely. Okay. It is. But yes, it is. But I don't think it's necessarily, at least my study. See, the problem is during the initial formative years of Huntington, there are no Black people. There's one gentleman, Robert Long, in 1872, who is explicitly political.
Right.
But I cannot align him with any particular church. So I think he's coming out of a secular tradition, in which he's a little bit more forthright in his political aspirations and the recognition that, hey, look, what currently is the status quo in this state is unacceptable. And that the political parties each political party, whether Democrat or Republican, neither one of them are really paying attention to you. Now, he's an outlier. He's unquestionably the exception. Most folks are much more interested in the church as a place of refuge, as a place of regeneration, and as a place of spiritual outreach and fulfillment. Um, and with that, within the church, it should also be said that, given the fact that blacks recognize that the political power that that many of them may at least express that they want to uh, um, achieve, they recognize that that's just not going to, the numbers aren't in their favor. And so let's shift the lens then. If we can't really control the politics of a region, why don't we at least try to um, control or what's the word I want to use? Um, make fertile our domestic situation. Concentrate on the home front. Concentrate on sending our children to school. Concentrate on building up moral character so that we can demonstrate to white America and to ourselves that we can be American citizens in the most vibrant of ways.
Do you think in that regard, and Ben, I'll shift it over. I mean, are they adhering to sort of Booker T. Washington's ideas? Are they subscribing in an overt way? I mean, was there evidence that they were reading Washington and that was ultimately seen as the path forward?
No, I don't have any, certainly in the first, in the formation of the city, I don't have any evidence of them reading Booker T. Washington. And I don't have, my sense is they're not reading at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're, my evidence seems to demonstrate that most of the folks were illiterate, semi-literate. They may, they're going to school. But I don't, to what extent they were exposed to a variety of models, let's say, political theories in the early years, I just don't think they were. I think they were very much beholden to the primary objective of let's build Black institutions so we can demonstrate to ourselves and to white America that we have a moral fiber and a moral value system that will demonstrate to them that we can be abiding citizens within this situation, within this town.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Ben, yeah, sorry.
Oh, great. Well, I have so many questions, but I guess I'd like to riff off of some of the themes that have emerged in the discussion so far, namely the sort of the landscape of Black sociability in Huntington, and yes. I think we'll come to housing in a minute, but I want to talk about or just ask you about churches and the space of Black spirituality and Black community within the context of the church. Are these spaces, I mean, well, how does class operate in these spaces?
Sure, sure. I mean, that's why you have 4 Black churches, right? I mean, part of that is, there is, you asked me a great question about whether there was an explicit class stratification or class tensions. I don't necessarily, again, this is one of those questions that would have been great to have, one Black person comment on, I hate this guy because he's, or I got great anger towards this guy because he's not a union guy, or he's so interested in his money and his house as opposed to really elevating, in what's engaged in the whole notion of racial uplift. I don't have that. Unquestionably, even if it is occluded, there were class tensions. I mean, that's why you have these formation of different churches. I don't know to what extent it was divisive. To the extent, I think racial uplift as an overarching philosophical foundational glue was an overriding factor. All these, in large measure, at this time in the early 19th century, late 19th, early 20th century, excuse me, all these folks are coming from the same place. They're all coming from the same economic status in large measure. There is not one person that I know of in the early formation of Huntington, at least in the late 19th century, who comes from what we might call money or even a middle class background. They're all working class laborers seeking to move. And in fact, I don't think there's even one person who's educated. They may be entrepreneurial, which unquestionably they were. They may be, unquestionably, they're hard workers. They're skilled laborers to some extent, because they're building these churches, they're building these houses. But as far as is any one of them an intellectual at this stage of the game? I don't get a sense of that. I think increasingly, as Huntington opens up and becomes a more vibrant institution, it then begins to draw in Blacks from adjacent communities who have been better established, longer established, who then can bring in a differing type of worldliness or cosmopolitanness that can maybe help inform and guide these the initial settlers into Huntington. And I think that's what we see when we see the formation of Douglas High or Douglas School, because the teachers are essentially coming from Gallipolis, Ohio. They're coming from outside of Huntington because they've garnered an education. And so, but they recognize that West Virginia is offering them opportunity. And so let's relocate down from Gallipolis to Huntington, and let's help build this community.
Great. And so it's fascinating. We've when I'm trying to create in my mind sort of this mental sort of map of the sort of the landscape of Black Huntington. We see you began with that wonderful vignette about sort of community on the front porch. So that's an area of sociability. We now have the churches, and can I ask you to sort of talk more about Douglas High and the community that surrounds that, and the role that high school played in the formation of community in Huntington?
Sure, Ben. Thank you. Let me just. I do want to go back to the question of class again, tensions, because unquestionably, as it becomes more prosperous, as Black people become more prosperous, you do have a red light district, and so you've got, workers, common laborers, day laborers. I would imagine probably some Black, professional class, who may be frequenting these establishments. Unquestionably, these establishments owned by Blacks, and the great entrepreneurial spirit that exists in America, where you could take advantage of money, folks who have money and have nowhere to spend it, and want to spend it in vice, gambling, prostitution, and other alternative, other exploits within the alternative economy. It would be exceedingly difficult for me to believe that Carter G. Woodson would have ventured into those venues, or other Black professionals. When we get to the early 20th century, this is when we begin to see this kind of, the notion of we're going to be like Booker T. Washington. We're going to subscribe to the up from slavery narrative. We're going to engage in racial uplift. But unquestionably, not everyone believed in that. Not everyone thought about going or even going to the church of any kind. That wasn't their thing. And so those folks would have been frowned upon, I think, by the general community. And they were frowned upon by the general community. Douglas High School, becomes, I would think, becomes the most important institution within the city, because it's going to provide that education by Black teachers who are many of them with better credentials than white teachers of that era and of the town. And so it's not just about educating, it's about educating in the right way. It's about understanding that I know where you came from because I actually lived that experience. And you know, I'm not going trying to make this a political statement, but the truth of the matter is that it helps to develop a generation of a professional class that's going to transform, that's going to be quite influential within the Ohio River Valley, within the state, and within the region. You know, Carter G. Woodson is just one example. You know, it might be perhaps the most illustrious example. But there are other examples. You know, my dad is a graduate of Douglas High School. He'll tell you right now to your face that unquestionably he had a better education there than I had going to Huntington High School. And I don't disagree with him. And so when you have, you know, when the ecosystem is in essence one in which you are elevated, you are what's the word? You know, tough love, I guess, might be one example. When you see people who in essence are invested in your welfare, who know your families, you know, I'm not trying to make this so you know, steeped in romanticism, but that was the truth of the matter. And so, you know, it should be said that these folks, and to whether the argument could be made whether folks really covet education, unquestionably, these folks, this was their mandate during this era. This is the ticket by which you will move up. And not only that, move up, but help the race move up. And so that was, in my opinion, Douglas High School and other Black high schools were the standard bearers.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I think it would be useful in this last block here to not move us fully into the modern era, but to start thinking a bit about legacies and about the mythology that does still, I think, so much influence how both people within and outside of Appalachia perceive the region. And so maybe we could start at the microcosm, and you know, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about how Huntington's Black community has evolved over the course of the 20th century. Again, this is a personal narrative for you.
Sure.
And yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just, you know, one of the things that really strikes me about Huntington is the Black Huntington is the, you know, Douglas High School used to have a reunion every 2 years. And so, I know that other Black high schools have reunions. You know, that's not really uncommon. I think what is uncommon and what is refreshing and really important about what has transpired is that Douglas and Huntington High now have a Black high school, a combined Black high school reunion. And so it has allowed for an intergenerational circumstance in which folks get exposed to family members from different generations. They get exposed to the histories. And it had an indelible impact upon me because I realized it allowed me to see, it allowed me to get out of my, you know, we talk about a microcosm. It allowed me to see movers and shakers, influential people, you know, vice presidents of banks, vice president of a corporation, you know, folks, lawyers, and other things, you know, and see this transformational, this intergenerational transference of talent, education, and perhaps wealth, which is one of the continuing problems of the Black community. Is that, you know, we saw, if we want to give one example, Tulsa, you know, Black Wall Street. You know, and that's just one example. There've been many examples, you know, dozens upon dozens of examples in which Black people constructed something, sacrificed for it, and then it was taken away in the blink of an eye, and then they're and having to start over. And what does that do for the next generation? How
Right.
much does that impact them? And so, for me, it is really quite. Um, you know, it's just one of the, it makes me feel, I guess, positive, hopeful,
Mhm.
about the future, because I see people who are doing great things. And I just don't mean, you know, just because you're a doctor or lawyer. I mean, you're contributing members of the society. Just that alone is enough for me. You know,
Mhm.
whether you are, you know, a sanitation engineer, you know, whether you're a social worker, whether you are a hairstylist, you know, all these people are working member of the society. They're not criminal. They're not out there, you know, draining. They're not welfare moms or all those things. You know, they are quintessentially American, moving, working hard, sacrificing, making tough decisions, contributing to making this place, making society a better place.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's indeed hopeful, which is sometimes a hard message
Most definitely.
to
Most definitely.
swallow these days. Um,
Um,
yeah, go ahead,
no,
please.
and so, you know, Huntington now, you know, it went through. Trust me, and anyone who's been to Huntington recently knows it went through a really terrible time in the 70s and 80s. Well, I guess from the 70s on, with the deindustrialization process. And the Huntington now is, I think, is not even a city, technically a city. It's under 50,000.
Right.
And so it's got, you know, between out migration, you know, the deindustrialization, um, methamphetamines, opiates, crack. Um, it went through a bad patch there, unquestionably, a bad 20 to 30 years. I think perhaps it is stabilized to a certain extent that you can kind of begin the rebuilding process. I think the city leaders are trying to do that. I'm involved in a project in trying to build a tri-state African American Heritage Center in Huntington, and we've got the backing of some significant state, federal, and local entities and individuals, and hopefully we'll be breaking ground on that
Oh,
next summer.
oh,
Um, um, COVID, we'll see what happens with COVID-19 though, and the impact of that. But that is the overarching goal, and I've been involved in that for about a year. Um, and I won't tell you the folks that I've met with, um, but this is no fly by night vision. We've got some serious folks who are very serious in their commitment and in their donor and their money and making this venture get off the ground.
it's fantastic. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I really am excited about it.
absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Sorry, Ben. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, that was I was just agreeing. Wonderful, wonderful news.
To sort of bring it home then, Cicero, you and I are both recently published authors, and so
Yes.
there's a certain weight associated with that. What do you want audiences to walk away with? What message do you want them to take, and how do you want them to understand Appalachia differently after reading your book?
Yeah. Um, well, you know, it's a funny. I tell you, and maybe you know this. You guys both know this. You know, when you're in the middle of writing, you're in the middle of writing. You know, you're in the process.
Yeah.
It has been so gratifying for me, for you folks at Shepherd, for the Center of Civil War Studies, for the Center of Appalachian Studies, for you folks to be hosting me for this has been so gratifying, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think that you know, I stand on the shoulders of others. Um, you know, Carter G. Woodson was unquestionably um, an inspiration for me, as well as the local uh, um, Mrs. Duckworth, my local Black historian. I mean,
Mhm.
there's just so many folks there that entrusted me that I would get this narrative done. Um, and I'm just so gratified and humbled that I was able to get it done. If there's anything I would like to say is that, you know, this story is not about me. It really is about these pioneers who took a leap of faith and moved to a new town under the most arduous of circumstances and build lives.
Mhm.
Um, and I think at its essence, that's really what this story is about. These folks who challenged Jim Crow mechanisms as best they could, raised families, built institutions, contributed to the body politic as best they could, and contributed to the economic foundation of the city, the region, and the state. And in the process, um, um, made an overarching impression um, that I think has been underserved.
Mhm.
And so that's what the book was about, is just elevating these folks to a place in which folks recognize that um, Black Huntington, Black Appalachians are part, deserve to be part of the conversation.
Need to be part of the conversation.
Yes, yes. And I will say this one thing for the audience out there and everyone else. There was a show, Andrew Bourdain
All right. Yeah.
came to West Virginia,
Yeah.
and because he was an anti-Trump person, and he wanted to see, he wanted to come to the state and explore, just what the hell was going on with this state and supporting this man. And at a certain point, he goes into I don't know if it's a coal mine, or he interviews coal miners, and the group is black and white coal miners, and he asked the white coal miners, "Well, what do you think about Trump?" And they gave their reasons and things like that. He didn't ask none of the black coal miners that were there.
Hmm.
And that to me is symptomatic of the invisibility of black folks within Appalachia.
Hmm.
If Andrew Bourdain, and I love Andrew, but if he can't come down and ask black people what they think about Trump, that's a problem.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, oh,
Well, Ben, do you have any final?
Well, no, I would just like to thank
yeah.
Cicero Fain for coming back and talking about the Black Huntington, and more broadly, I think what was intriguing about the conversation is how wide ranging it is, and just reveals how much work really needs to be done. I guess if I have one final point about out-migration, so much of your research for the book was based upon sort of community memory, right?
yeah, sure.
And that we did end on on an optimistic note. I can't let that stand as a
Yeah.
precedent.
No.
Yes, yes.
But so that's one aspect of the story that really does. I was thinking about it a lot when I was reading it. That worries me, is the out migration and memory, and how that will work in the future. And I guess my final question would be: do you have any thoughts about that, and sort of the just the future of Black Huntington within sort of an intergenerational framework?
Sure. I'm Huntington will never be what it was. Charleston will never be what it was, unless something dramatic happens in the political leadership and in the nature of this, the economy, this dependency upon coal. Unquestionably, I would suggest that West Virginia is at a real interesting place, because I just don't know to what extent it's visionary.
Mhm.
I just don't know to what extent it's going to tap into the global economy in a way that that will bring diverse peoples to the place that will energize it in a way that was done when the Black migrants arrived in the 1870s.
Yeah.
It is an interesting thing because unquestionably there's a yearning upon those folks who have left the region to come back. They want to come back, but they want a reason to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And as the current political culture and the current economic status of the state and racial, I would say the racial composition to some extent, impedes them from coming back. And so if the political leaders would recognize that the way the state is going to move forward in a dramatic fashion is to acknowledge that,
Right.
then perhaps we can move forward in a really productive way. It's West Virginia. It seems to be stuck in
Mhm.
stasis, and so until you get someone a fresh new face in there with some brand new ideas to shake it up, I think it's gonna be one step behind. It's gonna be more like many places of the deep rural South than it will be of the vibrant Eastern Panhandle.
Yeah, a lot more work to be done, certainly.
Yes.
And a lot of big questions that our state's confronting, and not coming up with necessarily the best answers right now.
Yeah. Those are some. It really does involve some hard conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it requires vision.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Exactly right. Well, thank you to our audience. I think a lot of you seem to have known each other, which was really nice. So there's a community within the community.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, we deeply appreciate your time this evening. Once again, for those of you who don't have it, the book is Black Huntington, an Appalachian Story. It's an incredibly powerful piece of scholarship. And Cicero, you saw today, is a very eloquent spokesperson. We've enjoyed having you immensely. I think we're gonna have to get you again for the Reconstruction era stuff that you're working on. We're not gonna talk about right now, I know.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. To have you in person, but for now, we're going to rest upon our laurels and say that this was a very successful evening. Thank you so much for the information that you provided. Thank you, Ben, for helping to co-host / moderate this evening. And
thank
again,
you.
Cicero, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all out there. And the best of luck to everyone. And you can reach me at cmfain@csmd.edu. I would also tell you that I can give you a discount on the book, as opposed to buying it through Amazon or someone like that, or the press. Contact me directly, and we can work out a better deal. And so there you go.
Academic books these days are very expensive, so
yes,
pursue that offer. Yeah,
I'm at I'm cmfain@csmd.edu.
And with that, everyone stay healthy, safe, and well. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next program.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.